If you have an older Volvo S80, say a year like a 1999 or a 2001, maybe even a little earlier or later, you may have run into some very scary messages up on your dash panel. I'm not going to videotape the car driving down the road for safety purposes, but you might find things like ABS, the traction control button coming on, perhaps the check engine light come on, and over on your info side you might have something very scary like brake failure, stop safely ASAP. What could all these messages lead to? Most likely it is a failed ABS or anti-lock brake system on your car. They're very common to fail on these cars. You might even have a lot more symptoms here where lights come on, these idiot lights come on intermittently, but generally you'll find the ABS and the anti-traction control light coming on. That's most likely caused by a failed ABS module. Over the next few minutes I'm going to show you how to have your ABS module repaired. This is going to actually be in 3 parts here. I'm going to shoot it all in the same video here, so don't fret. You'll learn the whole process here in a short few minutes. Step number 1, or I guess part number 1, is to remove the ABS module and package it up. Step number 2 is to send it off to have it repaired. I'll give you the link to a guy that does this. And part number 3 will be to simply put the ABS module back into your car. If you've gone to Volvo, you've probably gotten a quote like $1,200 or $1,400 to have this thing replaced. If you went online and tried to buy one, they probably used big scary words like programming needed or special tools required. Basically, when the car gets over 20 miles an hour or 15 or something like that, the computer talks to the ABS module and sort of turns itself on, if you will, and that's kind of the programming step that happens. I'm going to show you a tool that you're going to need, the special tool required, in just a few minutes here, but it's very, very simple. You can buy them online for $5 or so. The whole process here is probably going to take me maybe an hour, half an hour to take the module off, and a half an hour to put the module back on. Shipping it to California and getting it back is all of about maybe 3, maybe 5 days total for all of this the process to happen here. Now, when you have your ABS module, I'm not going to tell you if your brakes are or aren't going to work. I do not want to be liable for what you do. Keep in mind, though, that your insurance company probably insured you with your ABS module intact. You get into an accident without that thing being on, they may not pay for any claims that you filed against it. So do what I do. I'm going to leave my car sleeping in the garage. I'll take the wife's car around, and when I get my module back, we'll put it in. We'll be all nice and safe and doing things correctly. So let's get started. Okay, this small black box down here, that is your ABS module. You can see one of the screws right here, another one here, and 2 way up underneath, exactly the same type of screws, but sort of more in the back of the car. These are obviously the brake fluid lines coming in out of the manifold body up here, and right here is an electrical connector that we have to take off as well. Don't be too scared about these getting these screws out. They're actually very, very easy to get to. It looks kind of tight in there, but I've got medium-sized hands and they fit in there with plenty of room. It's best you remove your air cleaner sort of intake cover here. Just a couple clips pops this out, and will give you a whole lot more room to get to that ABS module. I'm going to show you this all along the way, so you're not worried about how difficult that is to get out. The tools you need for this job are pretty easy. You're going to need an anti-static bag to pack up your ABS module and send it off for repair, a plastic bag and some tape to just cover up the brake unit just so you don't get dirt and gunk and stuff up in there. If you're like me, I like to have rubber gloves just so I can protect my hands, and some sockets here, and the most important thing, the tools, this special tool required here. This is a Torx T5. Actually, might be an E5. I can't really read the writing on here. I think I bought this online for about $5. And it's incredibly important to have this exact size right here. If you try to use like a 532 on the bolt string of the ABS module, you're probably going to strip them. You probably won't be able to get it off, and then you're going to be up a deep creek. Spend $5 and get one of these things. It's well worth every penny. Getting the air cleaner box off really required taking the top off, clearing the pipe, and simply just ripping it off. There's a plastic clip right here that sounds like you're going to break it, but there's no screws that hold it on. You just have to pop it off with some brute force. All right, now that the air cleaner assembly is taken out, you can see the ABS module, and you can get to these back screws a whole lot easier. Step number one is you've got to take this cover off. If you can notice, there's a small brown, like a little retaining clip right here. Just very carefully put a screwdriver in there, kind of pry it away, and this little black cover kind of pops right off. Removal of this thing is a little bit tricky. There's a little black clip here and another one in the front. What you're going to do is carefully pull these out, and you'll see that there's kind of like sliders on these things which align with some pins on the very bottom. So it's kind of work all in unison. So give it a little bit of a tug. Get it going. Slide the clip out a little bit and just keep pulling these things back until you get your that little tan clip off. This is probably the hardest part of the whole job here, is getting this thing actually off. It's really not that difficult. It's just kind of a little bit of an alignment. Okay, now the clip is off. Time to remove our ABS module with our handy dandy Torx T5 bit, or E5 bit I should say. Okay, you may or may not need an extension on this. The first few here I won't really need. I'll go ahead and break these two bolts loose and get the one in the back here that I can easily see. Well, not see, but feel. And then one in the very back, which you kind of have to feel your way around. You're not going to be able to see it unless you've got some mirrors and stuff. But believe it or not, it's really not that difficult to get to. Okay, let me get the one in the front here. It's a little bit of a tight squeeze, but you can do it. All right, once they break away, you can just take the bit off and just kind of pop it back in there, and just unscrew these things. Once you get these off, be very careful that you do not drop the long bolts. God knows where they're going to go in your engine. You got to go chase them down if you happen to drop them. I'm taking extra caution when I pull these things out. This is what they look like. Obviously the Torx fits in there very nicely. Do not use, like I said earlier, any kind of other hexagonal socket or something on that. You really want to have the right tool for this. Now that all bolts are off, just simply take the unit out. Nothing falls out here, nothing falls out there on this particular model. I can't say that for all Volvos, but you know, this is the way that mine came out. Two things: I'm going to wrap this guy up with plastic so no dirt gets in there. I'm going to put this guy in a anti-static bag. Before I wrap this thing up in anti-static and send it off to Victor, I'm going to email him the serial number, the model number, even take a picture of the back of the unit so he knows exactly what this thing is. And just to make sure that he can repair it before I go and send it off. I'm sure he can, but you know, it makes sense to just go ahead and do this one precautionary thing to make sure that this exact unit is the one that he can repair. Let's go ahead and wrap it up and send it off. All right, I've just wrapped up my the brake module with plastic wrap just to keep dust and debris out of there. And next, what I'll do is, here's the contact information for the online Volvo ABS repair shop. Give Victor a call or email him and give him the basic details like the ABS part number, and you might consider taking a picture of your ABS and sending that along with it. Also check out his payment terms before you send anything in. All right, we've just got the unit back from Victor, and we're going to go ahead and install it. Pretty simple. The wires obviously go in the front. Remove the plastic wrapper that you had and very carefully slide it right back over those terminals, and return these 4 bolts back to their replace and tighten them down. I'm just going to get them finger tight, or at least start with my finger, then I'm going to use the socket to put them on the rest of the way. Sometimes a mirror is very handy to have. You can see it, but I was able to see the hole very easily with the mirror and plop the bolt right in where it needs to go. Then we'll just kind of give it a couple of turns just to get the screws started, and we'll tighten them down in a few minutes. It's again my handy dandy mirror to see where the hole is. And just like that. I can see the one in the front. I'm not going to use the mirror. It's pretty easy to see. It's just kind of tight with all those brake lines and stuff going around it, but you know, if you've got even moderately sized hands, you should be able to get this thing in and out relatively easily. Okay, now that the bolts have been started just by my fingers, I'm going to go back and tighten them down with the E5 socket. And I'm going to come back later with the wrench and get them good and snug. But right now I just want to get them at least as kind of as tight as I can, so when the wrench goes on it doesn't back the screws back out. Or back the bolts back out. A little tip here, I simply put my finger on the very bottom of this, held it on with one finger, came in with the other finger and turned it that way. Might be a way to use two hands in a very, very tight spot. Once they're in hand tight, make sure this is going the right direction and simply tighten the bolts down. Last one in the front, and that pretty much concludes getting the ABS unit back on. Next, we just have to hook up the electrical connectors. Now that you have the ABS module on, first thing is to pop this small electrical connector in the back. And then the next part is just to carefully slide this in. You remember these little sliding clips, there's a small notch in there which has to fit into this. And that's what causes that little mechanism there to work. So once you get it started, you push these in and it draws it up tight for you. The hardest part is aligning all of these little sliders and whatnot. So I kind of get it in a position, wiggle these things back and forth till you kind of feel them lock into place. Get it going and just carefully push them in. Just like that, you've got your electrical connectors back on. Last step, if you remember taking this little guy off, you just simply pop him right back on. And you probably hear a little snap click when this thing is seated. Now I've got the intake lines in place. I'm going to use a flashlight to kind of align the pins up. Pop the first one on, the back one on, and the side one over here, which is kind of underneath the side. Got it just like that. Make sure the hot air for the exhaust manifold is hooked up properly, and all of these tubes are on there correctly. Next, return the top back to its rightful place. Popping it into shape and using the clamps to clamp everything back down. Now if yours is anything like mine, these things are all broken except just a couple left. And but that's, it is what it is. It's an old car. Make sure you pop all of these small vacuum lines back on, especially this one right here that goes onto your intake manifold, otherwise your car will run very, very goofy. Now if after you have taken your car for a test drive and find out that the ABS module is working, step on the brakes a few times in a nice vacant parking lot, your ABS or your check engine light still may be on. Don't laugh, but this seemed to work for me, is unhook your battery, and unplug a few fuses that are related to your ABS circuitry. Leave them out for 10 or 15 seconds or whatever, and then pop them back in. Make sure you get them in the right slot though. Well folks, that's it. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to comment.